NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams is here with the latest. And so, Pete, why do we think this judge made this determination in this ruling, and how significant is it more broadly?
Well, he says why, and this is a dispute over whether the January 6th committee can have some emails that were exchanged between John Eastman and members of the Trump campaign, including the president himself, in the run-up to the counting of the vote on January 6th. Eastman had argued that these were covered by a privilege, lawyer-client privilege largely, and the judge agrees with that. But the judge says there's an exception to that privilege. It's known as the crime-fraud exception. And if the emails were about violating a law, then they're not privileged. And the judge says that privilege doesn't apply to some of these emails for that reason. He says this about Eastman's idea that Vice President Pence on January 6th could simply refuse to count the votes from the 7 states where Trump supporters said there was election fraud. And that would have done one of two things. It would either have deprived Joe Biden of the majority, Trump would have won based on the number of electoral votes, or would have thrown the election into the House of Representatives, where the Republicans had a majority in state delegations. But Judge David Carter says this: the illegality of the plan was obvious. Our nation was founded on the peaceful transition of power, epitomized by George Washington laying down his sword to make way for democratic elections. Ignoring this history, President Trump vigorously campaigned for the vice president to single-handedly determine the results of the election. So he says it was a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, the counting of the vote, and a conspiracy to defraud the federal government. But he says, don't get too excited here. He says, the public is still searching for accountability. This case cannot provide it. This court is tasked only with deciding a dispute over a handful of emails. This is not a criminal prosecution. This is not even a civil liability suit. At most, he says, this case is a warning about the dangers of legal theories gone wrong, the powerful abusing public platforms, and a desperation to win at all costs. So it's certainly a very interesting and telling conclusion by a federal judge who agrees with what the January 6th committee said, that there was possible crime by the president. But it doesn't change the fact of whether the president's going to be prosecuted. There's nothing in here that the Justice Department didn't know. This is not a conclusion about whether, in fact, there was a crime committed or even whether charges should be filed.